Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanaka Oberhuber, and I'm your host. My guest today is Dale Walsh. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. How are you today? Thank you very much for having me.
Very welcome. And I'd like to start with a question which you can take your time to answer. How did you come to see the world the way you do today?
I consider myself. I've always been sort of a unique person. I was I was always the shortest kid in my class, but I was also one of the toughest. And the bigger kids never like messed with me or anything. So basically, even growing up, I was sort of like my nickname my senior year of high school was Feisty, and so people would call me Feisty, and I think I've always been feisty, and so this sort of like translated when I was at Dartmouth College in 1975, and I came up with a joke, "Hi, I'm God," and I thought it was like the funniest joke I'd ever come up with, because how could God be 5'8"? But unfortunately, authority didn't see the humor in my joke, and so the campus cops came and basically took me to the infirmary. And one Tuesday, I was a successful, fairly Ivy League student, and the next week I was in a mental hospital in New York City. So obviously, and then I came to a psychiatric program in New Jersey for 5 years with intensive therapy, 3 personal sessions, and 2 group sessions a week. And so that basically is like that basically totally transformed my view and my paradigm of life. And so for the last 50 years, since 1975, I've been on a recovery from serious mental illness journey that I feel has basically reached the end of its like what is it, when someone is pregnant, what's that called, what's that period, the 9 months, the
Let's see.
it's called, well, the pregnancy period, the 9 months. So basically, I feel that after 50 years, I've reached a point where my mental health recovery is complete, and now I'm ready to enter the world and share with you and as many people as I can, not only my revelations about mental illness and schizophrenia, but also about my own observations about life and the mental health system, and what I perceive to be the truth of what life is about.
So you spoke of a paradigm shift. What was that shift?
Well, before I got taken away from Dartmouth, I was on the fast track to American success. I went to a very good boarding school, highly regarded boarding school. I ended up at Dartmouth College, of Ivy League college, and so basically, my goal was always to be a writer, and that's actually something that I've achieved. But but the paradigm shift was, just a total transformation in my perception from being like a very healthy and well adjusted person to having more and more medical professionals tell me I was psychotic, and that ultimately that there was no hope for me, and all I could ever hope to do is cope. And that's something that basically changed my paradigm, shifted my paradigm from one of self-sufficiency and independence to one of like self-imposed limitation, and ultimately disempowerment of myself, which it's taken me. I mean, that's really been the source of my recovery journey, is like re-empowering myself after losing my confidence in myself due to the intensity of my therapy.
So do you consider it as helpful that because you said it was started out with something that you describe as a joke. You were joking and saying you're God. Was that what they concluded something helpful? Because if it really was just a joke, they would have noticed that you're not in any way mentally ill.
Well, that's the paradox, because ultimately the paradox is, to what degree was I serious when I made this joke that I'm God? And as time went on, for instance, when they put me in the hospital, I would this is sort of like a spiel I have, but I said I was a God, and I put me in the hospital, and my roommate's name was Gabriel, who was very deferential towards my mother, Mary Alma, whose second husband's name was Joseph, and who ultimately married the judge. So, as I'm sure you've heard of the concept of confirmation bias, which is that your brain will like accrue evidence of what you believe, no matter whether it's true or not. So basically, I got in a situation where when I went to my first hospital, I was just going with the flow. But then when I was in a psychiatric program for 5 years, basically I had to consider my whole existence and my whole perception of the world. And because of confirmation bias, it seemed more and more that as I was hospitalized more when I was in the program, for 5 years I was hospitalized 9 times, and I'd always get out of the hospital, which to me proved that ultimately I was always sane. But the confirmation bias was, the more they persecuted me, or the more they tried to convince me that I wasn't God, the more I became convinced I was, until I had a vision in 1984, a decade after I'd started my psychiatric journey, of the entire Earth being incinerated in a thermonuclear holocaust that just incinerated the planet. And I called that the death of Dale. And the death of Dale, to me, was very significant because it was like the death of my delusion. But the only way that I could get rid of that delusion of being God was by basically killing myself in a metaphysical sense.
Well, in many journey descriptions in the shamanic journey tradition, the shaman apprentice does go through a metaphysical death. Now, I don't know whether it has anything to do with your experience or not. I can't confirm or disconfirm, but I know that that's a very important topic within this shamanic tradition, and many of them, right? There's many shamanic traditions, but it's a very important one also in Northern America. That one goes through this experience of dying, and it can be symbolized in various ways. And then something happens to shift and become capable of following the path of the shaman further. What do you say to that?
Well, it's that I should share this because, as I said, the death of Dale, the vision that I had was September 27th, 1984. And just in the last 2 days, I feel that Dale, the personality who was Dale, that was basically eliminated by the metaphysical death, in the last two days to a week, has finally returned from the front lines of the wars that he's been fighting as a war hero. But it's just been very exhilarating for me to feel this new sense of self, this new sense of old self coming back and reinforcing the you know uh, the alienation I felt for 40 years because of the death of Dale. I feel that basically I was disconnected from myself for 40 years. And as I say, in the last week, I've just had this new feeling of Dale being back for good in Teaneck Hackensack. And so that's very fulfilling. As for your question, I'm, I'm not sure exactly about the shamanic journey, but I do know that a lot of people talk about ego's death as a necessary step on the spiritual path.
Well, it sounds like you had to dissociate yourself from something within you to be able to reintegrate it later when you had gained further insight. The way you're describing, because you're saying something's coming back that you have been missing since that time, and that is supporting you in recognizing your ability to step out and speak about things and so on. You said you also wrote a book about the whole thing. At least I'm guessing it's about the whole process. I don't know. You might want to speak about that.
Well, actually, the book I wrote is called "Escape from the Ivy League," or "How Changing God or How Becoming God Changed My Life," and it's a memoir of what happened at Dartmouth. I was doing a lot of drugs. There was like I don't know if you know what a Kool-Aid acid test is, but that's basically where they put LSD in Kool-Aid and then you drink it, and you have like a group tripping experience. But so that was like that occurred at Dartmouth probably about like a week to 10 days before I got taken away. So that was basically really the triggering event that sort of started me on my own way. But fact is that um, I I mean my experience is, oh, I know what I wanted to say is that when I had that Death of Dale experience, I felt that it was like the end of my delusion, and my Dale had become personified by his delusion of being God. So when I had that Death of Dale experience, I basically lost that delusionary feeling, but I also lost my whole personality, because the problem with delusion isn't that people have wrong thoughts or incorrect thoughts. A delusion goes to the very structure of personality and identity, and that's why I think that it was such an extreme thing for me to lose the delusion. And because basically my whole personality system had to be incinerated, and I became my alter ego Dewey. And Dale thought it was God, and Dewey thought he was an android. And Dewey's program for by Dale was stay in Hackensack until I come back. There was never any guarantee that Dale would be back, but now, after 40 years after biblical generation, Dale is back, and it's nothing but positive.
There's no God deal, or did they eliminate these ideas, eliminated themselves, and now you can be a human being, or what is the idea behind
When I was at Dartmouth, I was having like racing thoughts and everything, but basically there were like two or three basic thoughts about God that sort of like came into my joke, and one is God just wants to be one of the guys. So, and the other one was you know well, my feeling about what as Dale saying he was God, my belief was that I could impersonate God, so that all this talk about whether God is dead, whether God exists, all this other discussions and heated arguments about the existence of God could be put to rest, because you can argue about God till you're blue in the face, but as long as Dale is concretely on this planet, then you have proof that God exists. And that's sort of like one of the underlying thoughts that was driving me when I made my God joke, just to prove. Because my first year at Dartmouth, my most significant course was a course in Nietzsche, and Nietzsche, of course, came up with the idea God is dead and everything. And so basically, I felt that the need for a deity, for a concrete deity, had to be fulfilled. And therefore, I felt that if I could say I was God and basically stand in for God. The third thing was God's not had a vacation in 13 billion years, so I'm going to give God a vacation. So basically, I sort of like came in and sort of like said, well, I'm God, and I want to be one of the guys, and I'm proof that God exists, because you can't deny my existence on earth, and God take a vacation. And so basically, I feel that God took a vacation for 10 years, and then when he came back, that's when the death of Dale happened.
Are you trying to say that you developed a different relationship to God, and instead of God, you being an impersonation of God, now you are able to access or to communicate with God as an entity that supports you, or what are you trying to say with that?
Well, just looking at the death of Dale, one thing that I say is extraordinary about the whole thing is that basically Dale died, but his body was preserved. His body wasn't killed, and so I think so I've been trying to figure out for 40 years who killed Dale, and but my relationship with God has definitely evolved. I don't think I'm God anymore. I'm a follower of the kingdom and Jesus, and the Christian faith. There's a difference between belief and religion, of course, but I in the last 20 years I've been going to church every week and everything. I'm sort of getting out of that now, but my relationship with God is definitely improved, and basically it's just like I still wrestle with the conflict of self internal acceptance versus external judgment. And I think that God, to me, sort of like represents a mix of the two. And so I still have like fears sometimes that I'm going to go to hell because I committed the greatest sin, which is that of Satan saying I was God. But on the other hand, God has shown me so much mercy and given me so many insights into reality, into His life, that I'm sure that I'm more like a best friend to God rather than the devil.
That does sound like a big shift. So, in A Course in Miracles, it says we all are infinitely valuable in the mind of God. And the idea of being better or separate from God is the one that made this world, this experience that we're having, as if it were real. So, you're describing, you were saying like you thought you were better than God, right? Well, that's something that many, many, many people have thought over the ages, right? Because they think, okay, I'll do better, right? I'll do better than someone else. I'll do better than what my teachers are telling me, whatever, right? We always have these ideas of that we're better than, or this and that. But in A Course in Miracles, it also speaks of the difference between equality and specialness. And this idea that one is special makes it so difficult, because that is one that makes us feel separate, while we are all equal. And that doesn't mean that we don't have special functions or special ways of being or special contributions to make, right? As long as we experience ourselves as human beings. But that doesn't make us special. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Well, actually, I've spent the last, I've been going through a course through miracles since about last October. So, you know, I am very impressed by it. I don't agree completely that there's such a like intense dichotomy between spirit and ego. I think you know, basically in miracles it says, you know, the ego is nothing, and try to get rid of it completely. And you know, I think the ego serves a valuable function in three-dimensional Earth, in three-dimensional reality of like how we process and everything. But you know, one thing, you know, that I think people sort of miss about what I have gone through is that I was never in competition with God. I was never trying to overthrow God. You know, I was always like extremely humble. I always felt the spirit within me, and I always felt that, you know, God was was sort of like chuckling at all the at my presumption at all the things I was doing, but he also knew that I was working for him when I was, you know, when I was sort of like saying I was him and everything. And it's been a process of like not only learning about the limits of that humility is endless and infinite, but also it's a matter of learning that, you know, the boundaries between God and myself or man are, you know, they're all self-imposed. And actually, just to put it in mathematical terms, you know, when I first got sick, my equation was Dale equals God. And now, since in the intervening years, I have like 5 basic personalities. There's Dale, Dewey, Do, Duck, and Genius. So I'm now at the Do stage of my development, which is the third stage of my development. But instead of Dale equals God, my equation now is Jesus equals God squared equals Dale cubed. But Dale, in that case, is everyman, and everybody can put in their name and be in a mathematical relationship to God through Jesus.
Well, the idea of ego and the Holy Spirit you were alluding to in A Course in Miracles, as the one being the right mind and the other the idea of separation. And the idea of separation isn't real in that sense. So you're saying that the idea of separation serves its role. Yeah, well, as long as you are experiencing yourself as separate, it is necessary, right? Because that's part of it. So yeah, it's not. A Course in Miracles is basically saying the ego doesn't exist in reality, right? In truth, but it's not. But that's a difference between denying your experience, right, and denying the reality of your conclusions about it. And the conclusions are the ones that we need to deny, not who we actually are. So I think it's about this idea of how we judge, right? So and this idea of forgiveness is to let go of the necessity to judge in the way we think in separation terms.
No, I agree with that completely. I'm just I think that one of the reasons people are born or incarnated on Earth is to find out how to bridge that gap between of separation between God and themselves. And I feel very fortunate that basically I feel I had like an inside track to God, and he's blessed me, and I felt his presence from to be frank, I used to say Dale knew what he was up to 20 years before anybody else knew what the hell was going on. So basically, I feel I've been blessed from the womb, and God gave me a mission to be able to convey my knowledge and my insights and even my wisdom to mankind. But the analogy I've sort of used is it should have only taken the Jews 11 days to get to the promised land, but it took them 40 years of wandering through the desert. So basically, my feeling about it is it should have taken me 2 weeks to go from Dartmouth to the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, but now it's already taken 50 years. But this is all the way the Lord works, and I know now I'm prepared and ready for whatever might come my way, and I'm not going to try to defend my position that I'm God, but I am going to try to I will defend my position of I have been touched by God, and I have a unique message that He wants me to spread, and that's my goal.
Yeah, that's very a lot to think about. Anyways, when you open up to this understanding that we all are here to remember who we are, to return home, to return to God, right? This is of course true. We all have a unique way of walking each other home. Now, your way is different than mine and from someone else, but it's all there to walk each other home.
I agree completely, and you were talking about no one's special, but no one's might be special, but everyone is unique, and that's sort of like something that's always obsessed me, is like to be unique and to prove my uniqueness. And that's one of the reasons why I went on the God thing in the first place, is just to be able to say, well, I lived life thinking I was God. And but on the other hand, I met people say to me, you have such an inspiring story. You've been through so much, 15 hospitalizations, and 5 years in a psychiatric program, and living by yourself, and all sorts of things. And they say your story is very inspiring, but I feel it's all part and parcel of what I wanted to do before I came to Earth. I believe that actually most people, everybody actually, writes out a script for their life before they incarnate and come to Earth. And so basically, I feel that everything that's happened to me, no matter how difficult it's been, and it really hasn't been too difficult, because my doctor used to call my illness psychotic bliss. So I've just been so blissful going with the flow for so long that, even though people see, I mean, there have been, I mean, like when at the death of Dale, I was in absolute despair for about 2 weeks. I didn't want to kill myself. It was just like this absolute loss of life force and everything. And so, but all in all, I've been very happy, and it's been a great ride. And this is what life's all about: is to experience as many things as possible, both feelings, thoughts, and and bodily experiences.
In A Course in Miracles, it says the only thing we all can agree on is that we want to be perfectly happy. And in A Course in Miracles, it also says that we all are, in truth, perfectly happy. So one needs just to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And you've stated that you felt the presence of God in your life, and you still do.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's not just feeling the presence of God. It's like rationally looking at my life and saying, "Well, God has blessed me," because I've lost a lot of friends to mortality and everything, and as I say, I've been on this mental health journey for 50 years, and in May I'll be 70 years old, and you know almost all my best friends have passed on, and it's just like I feel so fortunate and so blessed to be able to wake up every day and still be on earth and still be above ground, and and just like know that the reason that's true is because the Lord has been looking down on me and blessing me.
Yeah, this is a very interesting shift in perspective to feel blessed going through all this and being judged by so many, because obviously you were judged if you were told you're mentally ill, right? And you probably judged yourself as well for that. So the question is, how did you find the resources to see yourself as blessed in the midst of all of that? And now you feel blessed having shifted once again in the way you see it.
So the thing about when I was in my first hospital after Dartmouth, I would say to the doctor, "Why am I in here?" And he'd say, "Well, if you broke your leg, you come to the hospital, right, Dale?" And I said, "Right." And he'd say, "Well, you broke your brain." And this this simple sentence they gave to me like imposed like 30 years of like serious self stigma upon me, because when I was taken away in 1975, there were very few options for people with the diagnosis of schizophrenia. They could hope to cope. They could maybe live in an assisted housing situation, but I feel that like my journey has been sort of like a destruction of all the myths about schizophrenia, and what the potential of someone with schizophrenia is, because not only have I been living by myself and independently and unsupervised for 44 years, but I'm a college graduate. I was a scholar at Fairleigh Dickinson University. I graduated magna cum laude in English. I've had all these entrepreneurial things, and my brain has always been top notch, and I consider that like a real blessing. But you know, one thing that I feel is important for people to realize is that I think Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich said that you have to realize that for every adversity, there's an equal and opposite benefit that's potential. So I think that's very important to realize. And when I think about my mental illness, not only has it given me like a truly unique perspective on life, but it's also given me the opportunity to see how lucky I am. I mean, I was hospitalized 15 times, and every time I was hospitalized, I was staring down the barrel of the gun, a permanent institutionalization. So, just the fact that I'm on the outside and that I have my own apartment, I've been living on my own for so long, it is like a blessing in itself, just because I was never like taken away for good. I could very easily have been on a back unit ward of some state hospital for the last 35 years. So, but the curse of mental illness is something that you can turn around, but you have to have self-awareness. You have to, you have to be able to understand that you need help. But self-awareness is something that I teach in my mentoring, not only for the family caregivers, but also for the patients.
Another thing that was fascinating, you were speaking of, like, it sounded like a few personalities that you've been encountering that come through, right? This same body. Would you like to explain, do they still come through in different times, or is it somehow that they actually draw from the same things, or is there a huge difference in their appearance and what they do?
So this is a very good question, and this is something that I used to debate with my doctor about. I would say I'm a multiple personality, and say, no, Dale, you're a schizophrenic. So this is a serendipity happened one day when somebody came up to my apartment, and I said I'm a schizophrenic, which I would do, and he'd say, my mother works at a mental hospital. How many personalities do you have? And I said 5. So, but basically, my personalities. Uh, one of the reasons that I would go to the hospital, I think, when I was in the program, is because my personalities, my 5 personalities are Dale, Dewey, which is DW, my initials, Duck, and Genius. So those are like my 5 personalities, and they used to like always be in contention for control of the body. But basically, when Dale died, that whole debate within myself was silenced because Dewey, who was the android and the son of Dale, basically took over, and all 5 personalities could agree that Dewey was like was the bomb. So, in terms of a relationship, Dale is the father, Dewey's the son, Dew is the grandfather or the father of Dale. Duck is the brother of Dew and the uncle of Dale. And then Genius is the long term and is the offspring of Dewey. So basically, you have like 4 generations involved in one in one personality. But that, as I said, it's been a long time since there's been conflict between the personalities, and everything is well integrated. But ultimately, it's all integrated into what I call the Dialina body, and the Dialina is Dale's spaceship, and that's this concrete form, this concrete avatar.
Are you saying that it's a team now rather than a fighting family?
Correct. So, basically, we're all working for the same thing, and so, but for a long time, it was like sort of like the power dynamics within my own personality structures was such that there was competition, but now, after as I said, Dale died in 1984, and then Dewey went from 1985 to 2018. So that's 33 years, which is, of course, the age of Christ. But now I'm Dew, who's sort of like the grandfather, the patriarch of the whole structure, and so there's been like much more, after 33 years of Dewey, there's like much more peace within myself about my different personalities.
So what you're saying, it's not like a daily occurrence of shifting between personalities.
No, what another thing I'm saying is that the reason I had so much trouble for a decade before the death of Dale was because all of these personalities were like bubbling under the surface, wanting to express themselves, and everybody insisted that I be Dale all the time. And so that this led to frustration and even anger and rage within my deeper self, because all these personalities felt, they couldn't present solutions or even help people, deal with my psychosis, because every time I tried to, a higher personality would come through, then I'd be put in a hospital, shot full of drugs, and everybody would insist I was Dale. And the closest I ever got to permanent institutionalization was after the death of Dale, when I was in the hospital. I went into the hospital about like 3 days after that vision, and uh, one of the staff members walked by me and said, "Hi, how you doing, Dale?" And I just like turned on him and started yelling at the top of my voice at him, saying, "I'm not Dale. I'm Dewey. I'm Dewey. You have to understand." And there was like a real uh, dichotomy in my mind that Dale and Dewey couldn't exist at the same time. So, uh, and Dewey was very possessive of his personality territory. So, but that's all been resolved. But now it's we everybody has their place, and basically, I'm due for the next 30 years.
So what are you saying that the various personalities are informing the one that is in the foreground, or how does that work?
Yes, it's like everybody has feedback, but do is like the sort of like the overarching identity.
So, hmm. Yeah, this is a very interesting thing because this is a topic for many things, is when you have different perspectives on something or different approaches, right? How do you harmonize, or how do you use them all, right, for your good, right? And I think that that's a very important topic that you can speak on if that's something you're able to do, right? Combining all these personalities rather than having them be characters that express in a certain way, they're all expressing through one personality, right? And I think, some people speak of sub personalities and all these different ideas, right, in psychology. And you're speaking of schizophrenia. But what's very interesting is that one personality is in the foreground, and you're saying, like, for 33 years, for 35 years, for this and that amount of time. That's very different from what one would think of schizophrenia, at least when you're not someone who knows about it like you do, right?
Right. So yeah, it's very interesting, but basically the death of Dale was a big wake up call for this body, for me and my perception and everything. And basically when the death of Dale came in, then genius and do took over the body, because I was in complete chaos. Everything I'd ever known had like vanished and sort of like been violently destroyed. So Do and Genius sort of like came in and like oversaw things until the birth. So the death of Dale was also the conception of Dewey. So death of Dale was September 27th, 26, 1984. And the activation, I say activation because he was an android, of Dewey was July 4th, 1985. So in that period of 9 months, my personalities were getting to know each other and basically working together to maintain order among what was perceived as like a absolute chaos. And so then when Dewey came in, everybody basically breathed a sigh of relief, even though everybody still wanted me to be Dale. But Dewey is basically the most powerful of my personalities. So I call him the Emperor of Heaven, to tell you the truth. So, but he, but with Dewey in control for 33 years, and now sort of like having fulfilled his mission of 40 years waiting for Dale to come back to THC, everything's been justified.
Yeah, this is a very yeah, it's hard to grasp, right? Because I have a very different experience of self or of who I think I am, right? Though of course that's always an illusion to think one knows oneself completely. So one doesn't. But anyways, yeah. So remembering who we are is a continuing process. And so whether you go through this process with what you're going with, what you describe it as, right? I don't know. Not everyone can describe it that graphically of having, these different personalities speaking with each other and resolving things and ordering things and so on. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we do. Everyone goes through hard times, has to face whatever their idea of horror or chaos is, right? In one way or another, right? Or through sadness or all kinds of strong emotions. And I think your description of going through these strong emotions, like saying, okay, there's the end of this, right, era, right? There's no more Dale. There's no more this personality that has to step forward, right? This way of being that has to be in the foreground. What do we do now if this doesn't feel right anymore, right? What do I do? Or in your case, what do we do, right? But anyways, that sounds like, really, really fascinating, because this whole idea of who is the leader and who is best equipped to speak for everyone, right, is an issue in many, many groups of people. And whether it's within you or outside, the same issues probably apply, or I may be wrong. Maybe you want to describe that. What were these discussions about, and how did they come to a conclusion, or how did it decide on what to do about it?
Well, I think the discussion, I just came up. I just remember two little quotes that I think are pretty good. One is, "You're never alone with the schizophrenic." That's one thing, because a schizophrenic is never alone, because he has like his multiple personalities. And the other one is, "Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm a schizophrenic, and so am I." But but as for the question of control of like who's the dominant personality, that's something that uh, sort of like I've worked out over 50 years, because you know at, when 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 I was being, I call my Dale is God period. One thing that I was always fascinated about was what's after Dale. I mean, is there life after Dale? That's something I would always ask myself. And basically, I found out there is life after Dale, and it's Dewey. But in the 33 years of Dewey, all these issues that I'd been like grappling with because of Dale, trying to fit all these boxes into one little space, or uh, square pegs into round holes of my personalities. They all got resolved because Dewey gave me leisure to be able to look at what's going on, who I am, and ultimately, who's in charge. And it's basically, I mean, this might be sound rather delusional itself, but basically, I feel that I'm going to be able to live long enough to have all my personalities manifest for at least 30 years. So Dale died when he was 29. Dewey moved out in 2018, and that's when Deuce started his 30-year reign. And I know this might sound delusional, but with the research and life extension and everything that's going on, my philosophy is I want to live long enough so I'll never have to die.
Well, yeah, there's a whole lot of ideas about life, right? And of course, in Miracles, life is not connected to the physical life in the sense that physical life is life, right? Life is Christ or the oneness or the wholeness, the love, right? That we actually are. So the idea of having this, yeah, and also the idea of multiple lives and so on all include the idea that you would have different personalities manifesting, right? So whether it's in one so-called lifetime in one body or in various bodies due to reincarnation ideas, right? It's basically the same idea, right? There must be something greater than the personalities that come out, right? Something from which the source of all of that. And so, yeah, God or the creator or whatever the description of that is, right? There is a source from which we all come and which we all are, a child of, right?
Right. So, yeah, I just, well, I mean, if you believe in the second coming of the Lord of Christ, and and you can survive it, I recently did a Bible study with a good friend of mine about Revelations, and it's pretty sobering. But you know, the ending that's promised is eternal life in a body uncorruptible. So. And I believe Christ is coming back. I believe in I believe he's resurrected and that he never died. And so I'm just sort of like holding places. And about 2 months ago, I figured out that basically I came to God gave me a chance to fulfill a suicide mission on Earth, which is change to not change the prophecy, but to be able to guide the world through the prophecies so that all the destruction and all the mayhem and chaos that Revelations talks about can be avoided, and we can welcome back Christ to the world without apocalyptic destruction.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought. Anyways, yeah. So I really think there's a lot to look into when it comes to the idea of a source and we being the child of that source, right? And that the world as we think it is doesn't exist. And in A Course in Miracles, it also speaks of something that might be relevant to this, is that only illusions can fight illusions. And so the truth doesn't fight. It's actually, there is only one truth, only the truth, right? And the truth can't be altered. As you know, in A Course in Miracles, it starts with a few sentences that actually describe the whole book, right? So, yeah, I think that's something we can think about and feel comforted by.
Well, this brings up a much deeper discussion about truth, and to what degree is there absolute truth? People say the Bible and even other holy sources like the Bhagavad Gita and everything. They say these are the laws that people are governed by, and there are higher laws that are truth, but you're beyond subjectivity and personal prejudice. And I believe that. I believe that there are like higher truths that guide us, and one of the reasons for life is to find out what those truths are.
Or like A Course in Miracles says, to remember who we actually are, right? To remember, to walk each other home is a beautiful description of it. Because feeling separate means to have the necessity to rejoin or to remember the jointedness, right? It also says we all are holy, right? Or sinless, as it also says, and so many more words for that, right? So I think that's a very beautiful, beautiful thing to go with. Is there any question I haven't asked that you'd like to answer?
Well, this is just something that I talk about in general about a serious mental illness like schizophrenia and bipolar. Is this concept called agnosia, ANOSOGNOSIA, and it's a term taken from neurology for stroke victims who can't understand that there's something wrong with their brain. And it's been applied to psychiatry probably for about the last 20 years, but it's still not a concept that's well known. But basically, it means that people become treatment resistant because they don't feel there's anything wrong with them. And the analogy I sort of like have come up with, or actually somebody else came up with this, but I use it, is the idea that if you hold up a book in front of a blind person and say, read this, he's not going to be able to do it. So, so the agnosis were like holding up a book of symptoms to someone with serious mental illness and read this, and they can't read it. So, and it's estimated that 60% of schizophrenics suffer from agnosia, and about 40 to 50% of bipolar people. So you can understand the difficulty this can have in helping someone recover, because ultimately they don't think they need anything. They don't think there's anything wrong with them, and therefore they aren't going to take medication that makes them feel uncomfortable. And what's more, they aren't going to agree to see a therapist because they think it's a total waste of their time. So I just wanted to make people aware of agnosia, and it's like it's becoming more and more of a talking point in psychiatric circles. But just bear in mind that if you do come across someone who is suffering from mental illness, then there's a good chance they're suffering from agnosia, and rather than engaging them and trying to make them see the craziness of their ways, it's you got to take a much more sort of like low key and sympathetic approach to talking to them.
Thank you for that. That's a really beautiful understanding that you can only come by through experience, because I couldn't grasp that either many times, right? That someone would be able, when I thought I was able to recognize something wrong with them, right? Would not be able to recognize it, right? So yeah, and I would want to argue and try to get them to see the light. And that's the same with if you have someone who has extreme views, right? It usually doesn't make sense to argue. And it also, in A Course in Miracles, it says, in defenselessness, your safety lies. which I think is quite a beautiful thought, though I personally have a lot to learn about that because I tend to defend myself a lot. So yeah, there's a lot to learn there.
Then that's human nature to defend yourself, and so I mean, and basically Christ going to the cross and being crucified is the ultimate example of defenselessness and how it can be turned around. But not many people have the courage or the insight to do that.
And nonetheless, it's good to think about and perhaps let go of some of the defenses that we put up and start letting ourselves to be less defensive about more and more things. And then maybe we'll get to the point of no longer needing to think that it's necessary to defend ourselves about anything in particular. So yeah, thank you for this conversation. It's been really, really deep and insightful. And I'd like to remind the listeners and viewers that there's another conversation I had of how not to stigmatize bipolar, because I had a guest who was bipolar and spoke about it. And that was really important. And I've also had other guests who spoke about bipolar and their experience. And so and I also had an autistic man who shared his experience and story. So there's a lot to learn from these people, including today's discussion and conversation with you, Dale. I'm really, really, really thankful for this.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I've enjoyed this immensely, and we got into some stuff that usually I don't go into too much. So thank you for letting me expostulate.
And once again, thank you all of you for joining us in this conversation and walking each other home. Please subscribe to the podcast, let other people know about it, and enjoy the insights that you get. And if you want to be on the podcast, please connect with me and let me know about it. And if you want to join live, like some people have and have been listening in live as we had this conversation, just join the podcast Telegram channel, which is also seen in the description of the podcast. So if you want to look for that, you can find it. So thank you so much, Dale. This was amazing. I hope it's okay to say Dale, even though you said you actually see yourself with a different name at the moment.
Well, actually, as I said in the last week, Dale's come back. So it's been a long war for 40 years, but I'm back from the front lines of psychotic wars, and I'm a fully decorated hero, and ultimately just happy to be back in my own home.
So yeah, then welcome back and blessings to you all until next time.